Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that passes wisdom to the next generation of coaches, parents, and athletes. And in today's episode, we interview the head coach of IMG Academy Baseball, Coach Dave Turgeon. Dave Turgeon has not only is working for one of the most elite baseball programs in the United States, but also coached under Clint Hurdle, played under Buck Showalter, and has years of wisdom around obviously baseball, but coaching and impacting the lives of players, youth. So we dive into talking about connectivity and how we can build more connection to our teams, how we can help our players develop more self-awareness, and how as us coaches, we can transform them into leaders. So without further ado, you already know what to do. Let's dive in.
About some interesting topics, man.
Absolutely. So the first question we ask all of our guests is, what is your definition of impactful leadership?
Well, it's certainly changed and evolved, obviously. I grew up in a little different time when the word transformational leadership wasn't even a thing, and pro ball many years ago was, there's one guy in charge, and it was, there wasn't any questioning of things. I think that as I've kind of gone through my process and been around some really impactful leaders, I think to boil it down would be, number one, impactful leadership would be, it's number one, it's always about those relationships you have with your staff, and then B, your players. And the add-on to that is, what's the ripple effect, of those? Do those relationships end at the end of the season? Which would be, for me, transactional, or do they continue on and where you become not just a mentor, in the game, but maybe a mentor to those players or staff, in life. And I've had, obviously I've gone through the process, and I've had the ability to be around some very impactful and transformational type leaders, specifically in the last 11 years with Pittsburgh. Before I came to IMG, I was around some amazing baseball men and human beings at the same time. And, you realize that, the great ones that I've been around have been unbelievable people, and the connectivity piece is number one on that thing, and the competence piece is the number two, but they have both. Obviously you want to be competent, and then you're a very good, tactician, the ability to impact groups fundamentally and individuals, skill acquisition wise, impact their minds, make them problem solvers. But then, the transformational piece is, if you're a learner and you're constantly working on your game, and I tell you, I'm 57, still a work in progress. But I had a conversation with one of our coaches recently, and he said, what do you think the most important thing, about coaching is? And I said, look, if you're a learner, if you're going through the process and you're nailing your process every day and preparing and executing and reviewing daily and getting feedback, you're taking your group on that same journey, and you're showing them what that process looks like by executing it yourself. And that's, to me, real impact, and turn this off, and I've been around some incredible leaders that weren't necessarily transformational, but I still took pieces from them. I've added that, and it's become a part of, my deal. Different guys. Early on, I had some really good ones. Buck Showalter showed me what a prepared leader looks like. Stump Merrill was a guy who showed me what freeing guys up as a group to go out and have the ability to go play by simplifying, removing, rules and basically simplifying to bust your butt, be on time, and give me what you got. And so, and if you've been around the micromanager, the thumb guy and all of that, when, I remember, the story with, so Stump sticks out of my mind for environment and culture change. In '89, I was in the Carolina League with the Yankees, and we had a very good team of talented players individually, and we had a manager that was very heavy-handed and really micromanaged, and didn't catch us doing good all the time. But when we were doing bad, he'd catch us doing bad all the time and pile on. And so this particular guy got let go, and they brought in Stump at the break. We were last place. It was 2 halves. We finished last place in the Carolina League in the first half, and then Stump came in and freed us up. And we ended up winning the Carolina League championship, and we beat the Durham Bulls, and Grady Little was the manager of that team. We beat him at Durham, at the old Durham Athletic Park. But all it was a mind shift, and, freeing guys up. So, and then as I moved forward, from playing to, managing, my first pitch coach, Tony Arnold, was amazing. He poured into me, and I was not good. I didn't know what I was doing. I went from playing to managing, probably not managing myself even at that time. And he poured into me, had some tough conversations. And the beginning of my process was a dinner I had with Tony one night, and it was in August, and I had a young club, and I was managing. And I thought I was managing my butt off, and I was, to my understanding of what that even was at that time, right? And so he took me out to dinner. We had a beer, and he said, "Hey, I really appreciate what you're trying to do with our young players. I know what you're trying to do with them. You're trying to help them. I just want to give you a book that might help." And it was a book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So to give you an idea of where my head was at and my leadership skills at that time, Tony loved me enough and had the courage enough to start my process. And I was like, wow, so, and, self-awareness wasn't there. My ability to understand how important connection is, not just with the guys that's easy to connect with, but the intentionality of connecting with each player on his level was a big deal. And Tony started my process with that. And Teddy Kubiak was another one. Teddy, 3 rings with the A's in the 70s. We had some dinners and some talks, and closing your mouth, opening your eyes and ears, and start learning. And that was very, very impactful. And then, moving through, when I came to Pitt, Clint Hurdle was the first guy I saw at an elite level, in a big league clubhouse, handle things the way he handled things. He was incredibly connective, not just in the day-to-day process, but, I noticed in the dugout during games between innings, going down to get some water, he'd be, touching legs, touching knees, fist bumping guy, just very intentional. It was like these quick little dopamine hits, as he'd walk through his group between innings. And I watched and I learned a lot, from Clint, and he probably is the most dynamic, transformational guy I've been around. And his reach is so far beyond the game. But that's been that's been his process, and that's who he is. And he's really making a difference. And so he's been an inspiration for me in that regard, and I'm grateful for it. He's still, we're close, and he's still a mentor to me and all the guys I mentioned that I'm still in touch with, frequently. But some, So I go back to, I think what prompted or preempted the dinner with Tony, it was back in 2001. I'm sorry, it was 2000, and I'm in the Appalachian League, Burlington, North Carolina. And I snapped again, and I called the team into the clubhouse, and I gave them the old lollygagger speech from Bull Durham again, and I'm throwing stuff, and I think that preempted the dinner. The dinner was shortly thereafter, and he was like, man, this guy, bull in a china shop. But, we're a product of, kind of what we went through. And, and so, at that time to go from playing to managing, you haven't even transitioned completely out of that mindset of me to no, it's not you at all. And it's never about you unless things are going bad. It's about you. When things are going great, it's about everyone else. So, it was too frequent, and it was an emotional roller coaster for my staff and my players, and they need a thermostat that's somewhere between 72 and 75 consistently. And that emotional fire, which is great. It's a strength. If you have it under control, it's a flame, and you gotta be able to control that flame, and it comes with self-awareness of it. And I've actually, going from managing to coordinating, where you're coaching coaches, had these conversations where, I've seen myself in some young coaches where I say, look, I know you got a 97 mile an hour heater, but it's not good when it's thrown off the backstop. So when you command it at 90, 91 and you're in the zone with your stuff, now it's a strength. And if you need to bump it up once in a while, okay, you have that in your back pocket, but you can literally wear people out with that roller coaster of emotion and intensity if you're not aware of it, and being able to use it as a strength, not just, rolling it out all the time. And so I do this. I did an exercise with staff, coaches and managers called soundtracks. And the basis of this exercise was a self-awareness, and what is your energy that when you walk into a room, what soundtrack? So I had a theme from Rocky playing, Gonna Fly Now. And then there was the theme from Jaws where the music is very dark, and there's something impendingly bad. Some bad thing is about to happen. Excuse me. So then I take the same videos and I put different music in. And so soundtracks evoke emotion from the audience. And so whether you're aware of it or not, you have a soundtrack when you walk into a room. I would tell you that it was like Thunderstruck from AC/DC. And it was played at a loud volume, and the other volume was louder. So, when you don't know how to lead, you think you have to be a certain way. I'm going to be louder. I'm going to be the squeakiest wheel in the room. And it's really none of that. And it's more about leading, and conversations and being a good listener and being intentional, just listening. People want to feel understood. The best feeling that I had with leaders I've been around is when I had interactions with them, felt like they were hearing me and listening to me in a real way. But I felt understood. And I don't think there's a worse feeling when you, as a player, I remember playing for guys and never really knew where I stood, or I didn't have that vibe. And versus being around a guy who he's in the trenches with you, he empathizes with you. Hey, I've been there. You're going to be okay. I've been through that spot, and you're going to be fine. And walking alongside me, and that's a great feeling. And as a leader, can you leave them with that feeling, consistently, and that comes with awareness and intentionality and patience and, all of it, and leadership is hard. It can be hard. It can be lonely. It can be a lot of things. But, you've got to be aware of yourself first, and regardless of what is happening in that bubble over your head at the time in your life, you have to be able to handle that. So, yeah, I've had some good ones, man. And it's the impactful thing that we're talking about goes beyond it always goes beyond the game. And Clint, he fires off daily texts, emails, inspirational, spiritual, different things, but he always signs off with, make a difference today. Love, Clint. That's not just a talk, that's a walk. And those daily texts and emails, they keep me on track and keep me focused on what's important. And what's important is, the people that, are in front of you, the room. So.
I think there's so much wisdom and there's a lot to unpack there. So I think a few things, and before I want to dive into connectivity, but before we dive into connectivity, I appreciate you kind of sharing your story and the journey of how you kind of learned from leadership and going. And I am a similar coach, as in like when I went from player to coach, and I was coaching middle school kids. So like they probably knew even less than the guys you were coaching. I was a little bit of like yelling at this and that, do this, and they didn't know what I was talking about. Because I was a player, I had played a lot more advanced, basketball than they had. They had, again, no idea what I'm talking about. And that kind of like that intensity, like I had that intensity with the refs. And I don't know if you had it similar with umpires where, I was a hot-headed player. And so I started as a hot-headed coach, and that's something I'm personally working on is, this upcoming season, I'm going to try and be a little bit more respectful with the refs. And I've had the opportunity to ref a little bit myself, so I understand like how challenging it can be. But we're going down, that's the refs, that's a whole nother path, right? But connectivity, I think there is just so much wisdom that you have learned there from Showalter to Clint Hurdle to all the other wonderful coaches that you had under you. I'm curious what that connectivity looks like for you and your program at IMG Academy now.
So I believe that's the. So again, and coming down from where I've been, I would say, especially here, but now I understand, on a larger scale, it's all relative. It's important in coaching and teaching, period. All right. It is. So, some of the things that, that I've done. So the first thing is I want to bring the room together. So I want them to connect, together. And generally, when you're on the field, you're locked into, learning and the messiness of the day and trying to execute and get better. And so the connectivity part of the room is important. So I do, classroom sessions, once or twice a week, and they can run anywhere from 15 minutes to 20 to 25 minutes. I use that time for X's and O's stuff here and there. Most of the stuff we nail on the field with, writing and, whiteboard. But in the classroom, you have a new room. I may pick, each guy has a battle buddy, right? And the first thing they have to do is they have to give a 2-minute talk on, Elijah Green's life story. Elijah, you have JP Ortiz, you have 3 minutes to give his life story, and you get him up in front of the room, and they have to intentionally engage each other, and all of a sudden, it's a nice icebreaker, right? And so I do that with the whole roster. Number one, they have to talk to each other, but number two, getting up in front of your peers is a really uncomfortable thing. The air is very thin in the front of the room, right? But I do that because it's a great growth opportunity for them, and they get to know each other a little bit, and so do I as staff. We're watching it all unfold as well, right? So that's one thing. I do a love language test, which I got out of when I was with Pittsburgh, we had a marriage retreat for all coaches and wives, and one of these exercises we do was the love language test, and it's free. And it's about 5 love languages, touch, acts of service, time spent, gifts, etc. And so you go through this test. It's 10 minutes max. And you go through and they pref out what their number one love language is down to the bottom. And then we go up on the board and we write out the different love languages on the board. And under each love language, we write their names, Well, at first they're like, what are we doing? This is weird, and I've done it with coaches. I did it with my Arizona Fall League team and they had fun with it. Trust me, it's all in the cell and it ends up being fun. And guess what? One of the things that I learned, if touch is the last on my list on the love language thing, right? I've gotten comfortable with it, but I know it's last on my list. So when pitching coaches, when I was pitching, would come out, put a hand on my shoulder, it would electrocute me, and I'm like, man, that's a good one to know, This guy, he needs some touches. We got to fist bump him up. Hand on the shoulder's big with those guys. Hand on the shoulder with a little encouragement. Wow. Time spent. Call him in the office. Hey, man, how's it going? Everything good with the family? Anything, what's going on? Are you keep in touch? How's your grades going? You feel good? Just personal time spent is like money. It's gold. But that little simple test is an awesome way to express your connectivity with a player if you understand your player. And I think the key to coaching and teaching is knowing who's in front of you. Number one, what's the group need? But number two, what do they individually need in order to leverage what he brings, right? And package it that way, as opposed to this is how it's going to be. And, but the process of learning, guys, is awesome, and I missed out on that for many years, not really understanding how critical that was. And I will tell you that this generation, you hear coaches, they're always asking why. They got all the answers. They got this, they got that. Yes, we did not have, when I was playing, the tech, YouTube. We didn't have the internet. So we didn't know enough that we didn't know what we didn't know, but we didn't know much. It was all trial and error on field. Now there's a lot of value to that. Okay. But to understand this generation is to understand they have a lot of information out there. They know a lot more than we did. They have more information out there. They have hitting guys out there, body guys out there, pitching guys out there, away from where you're at, right? So you have to embrace that. The thing that I love about this generation, they've made me better on my game. When we talk about the competence piece, better know what you're talking about with these guys, because they've seen and heard a lot. So knowing what's out there for them is important to know what they're seeing out on the internet, out on the YouTube, and with all the stuff that's out there. And some of it's very good. Some of it's not right for a guy, and it's important. So it's important. So I think this generation has made me a way better coach. And I think that the one thing I learned probably 4 or 5 years into managing was they really don't care about your big league resume or whatever your resume is. They do not. Can I trust this guy? Can he help me? That's all they care about. And, I know that things evolve. My training has evolved, a lot of things on the field and my practice planning and, how I prepare guys mentally, physically. But the one thing that I'm really convicted in is that, and it's one of those things that I'm as close to the truth on that I feel in any part of this thing, So, can I trust you? Can he make me better? I mean, and then, and again, I have that conversation probably once a month with some young coach, and And I tell them, hey, if you're going to tell stories about yourself, don't be talking about your 3 home run games. They don't care about that. It just makes them feel inadequate. Tell them about how you went 0 for 5 with 5 punchies. Show your humanness. And the more you show how human you are and how real and being vulnerable in front of your room, I don't have every answer. That's powerful, man. And it comes, with your, confidence as a coach, and having to, think that you need every single answer. And it's always, this way for me, I realize that that's not the deal, man. The deal is you got to walk the walk and, be vulnerable at times, because confident men are. And, if we don't have an answer for it, we're going to get it. Let's walk through that. That's a great question. Players, there are players on every team you coach that are smarter than you. Right. They're smarter than you. And they ask very curious questions, which those are the players you really have to prepare for. And when they ask you those questions, it's awesome, because now you're learning from them. I never saw it that way. It's a great question. Well, let's walk through that. I haven't seen that scenario. Let's walk through that a little bit. So, I think that's another way of building trust, showing humanness, building trust with your player. Let's figure this thing out, right? And whereas I didn't understand, it used to be, just come up with something, fake the funk, whatever. But you got to act like everything, every single moment. Not so much, right? So important stuff for me, but yeah, I mean, that's obviously, we could talk for a long time about that stuff.
No, 100%. I mean, I think of that. I've tried to do that myself. Is like, at first, I feel like when I was a younger coach, I feel like I had a little bit more to prove. Like, I used to, I scored 30 points in this game, or, baseball, I went 4 for 4 and 2 doubles, right? Like, at first you kind of, because I feel like when you're a younger coach, you don't have the same competence, but once you kind of build that competence in your skills, I start telling kids, hey, I was cut my junior year from varsity and I played JV, and like, I struggle with shooting with people in my face too, because that's a big thing when I'm training kids. They're like, I can't shoot when there's a hand in my face, right? I'm trying to relate to them, and I think it's
exactly right.
It's just showing the humanness. So I'm curious how you help cultivate that self-awareness, because I mean, it sounds like the classroom sessions are big, but I'm curious how because as a player, I feel like
the other piece. So there's something. If I believe this is a calling, it's not a job. Coaching is a calling, and if it's not keeping you up nights and not getting you up early, don't know if it's for you. Because if you're constantly thinking about your room and your staff and how you can help them, I don't know. I can't necessarily turn that up. Now that's an issue too. And when I get home, I got to be, I'm intentional. I got to be present for, my wife, my family. And that's another thing, that I have to work on. But sending out specific videos or an inspirational article or saying that is very appropriate for a player because of a conversation you had with them that day, or blast something out to the team because you did a team session on integrity that day and defining what that looks like. Sending out a follow-up, video you saw on Twitter that's like, oh, boom, this nails it even better. Boom, blast it out to the team. Ask them about it the next day. What do you think? So, those are all connectivity pieces to the larger thing. But when they get specific things and you send a specific test to a player, I found that that's really impactful. They're like, the message is, I care enough to think about you beyond practice time, right? And that's really cool video. And you send me a major league video. You must think I'm really good to send me a major league. There's a lot of good stuff, and believe me, that matters. I had a very talented group last year, and there were certain players I framed, any time I would coach them up, I would frame it around, when I was coaching, you remind me of Brian Reynolds, outfielder for the Pirates. He's a really internal, cerebral guy, but very explosive, smart athlete. So his energy was always below the surface. And so it kind of looked like he was laid back. But and so when you bring these player comparisons to your guy, they're very much into that. And truth be told, I want them to see what they can be and how I view what they can be. And it is, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, every guy is a big league. You're going to be Brian Reynolds. This particular kid was, and he probably will be. You got, Jackson Ferris, you remind me of Steve Avery, when I was coming up and he was this, had a thunderbolt for a left arm and your fastball's got the same action. And, Elijah, I play with Gerald Williams. You're a combination of Gerald Williams and Deion Sanders. I've never seen an athlete move like you. You're better, and these guys did. And then you bring in what it is. And so player comparisons and connectivity with that upper level guy is a big deal too. With a lower level guy who he may not play, JUCO, D3, whatever, he may not even move on from here. The impact that you're showing him, what right looks like, it's always about the process, about your teammates, self-aware, all those things. And you find a way to connect with him on his level, and it's very meaningful, and it really, the trust goes through the roof, man. And I think there's a book out there called The Speed of Trust, and it sounds really cliche, but the reality of it is that if you have early work with a player, whether it's defensive, offensive, base, whatever, and you're one-on-one with a guy, they feel very cared for, they feel listened to. It's a collaboration of his future game, care, all that stuff, man. And you can really move guys with trust, and getting them in a really good headspace to make improvements.
Right. And I bet that's a big one, especially for, your athletes that are at such an elite level in high school and, listening to your podcast, a lot of them are away from their parents in their home. And so they need that coach, that manager to build that extra trust with them, because
no question.
I'm guessing they're quite a bit out of their comfort zone. So for me, I always try and help my athletes feel comfortable. Yes, I want them to feel uncomfortable with skills and push the box. But in terms of player performance, I recognize in myself and a lot of other athletes, you watch athletes get traded from team to team. They struggle on the team that they get traded to. I'm curious how you make your athletes feel comfortable, because so many of them are coming from away from home.
You bring up a huge point, particularly for this place. If you go back to, and I'm not sure how far away from home you went, to college, but when you make that first move away, you're leaving your anchor, either your mom and dad and brother and siblings and friends that you've had for 18 years, or maybe it's just your mom, or maybe it's just your dad. It could be single parent homes as well, but you're leaving your anchor and your blood. And so I remember back in pro ball when Latin guys would come over from the DR or Venezuela or Mexico, young players that would come over, and I would tell coaches, hey man, look, don't worry about the on-field stuff. Just help them in their transition because, their velocity drops, their game comes apart at the seams when they come over. There's so much stuff going on in their head, language, food, uncomfortable environment, everything, right? And so I realized then that transition is a big deal. And I think ideally I'd like to have our guys at least, for 2 years. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I get a guy for a year, and it's a very big responsibility. And I think I understood very early here that this is a much bigger responsibility than being a baseball coach because of that. And I'm not going to say that I fill in for that spot, but I can certainly help them out emotionally, spiritually, whatever, to be some form of an anchor for that guy as he's transitioning to a new team even. So, it's crazy about transition. And I think that it's a huge responsibility. And I think the beautiful thing about IMG is these kids will now roll into their freshman year at whatever, Power 5 or Division 2 or Division 1, wherever they're going, and they hit the ground running. I received a text last week from one of my outfielders from a year ago, and he's at Ole Miss now. And he said, Coach, not doing anything different right now that we never did last year in terms of, weight room, mental skills, nutrition, on-field practice, work, extra work, early work, all that stuff you put me through. He goes, I'm ready. I feel like I'm hitting the ground ready right now. And it was awesome to hear that, and some kids that go from, their high school to, those schools, it's a little tougher transition. So they're going through it a year or two earlier, and you impact that, right? So you be aware of, are you showing what right looks like over and over again, and, how you show up early, how you work, how you respect every rep, how you respect your teammates, how you respect the game, and all the soft skills stuff, life skills, that really, obviously they impact on field, but they impact their lives. And a lot of guys aren't going to play in the big leagues. The vast majority are not. They're some of them peter out at the next level, but there's some important lessons of stuff that we can impact them with. And I talked about the ripple effect early. What do you want it to be? You want it to be, I helped his swing, or, he invites you to his wedding, and I think it's a big deal, and I'm still refining all of that. And it's exciting because, I understand its importance, and, I'm trying to look with creative ways to be connective. And it's not a once in a while thing. You got to continue to water your plants if they're going to grow, right? So it's not a once in a while thing. It's an intentional thing. And you need to love it. And I think if there's one thing about building trust, boy, is as Clint used to call it, is the give a crap meter. And he doesn't use the word crap, but the give a crap meter is really important. And I think kids and dogs know when people are full of crap. Dogs they stay away from people, and then the kids are like, I don't know, something about them, so they can't really articulate it, but they know, right? So care level's got to be real because they know, that's the one thing that coaching, marriage, and children, they know, right? So if you're gonna be this guy, they know, because they have that sense, they know. So, but yeah, those are some of the things that we do in the connectivity piece. And again, when we finish this thing, and I'm out on Twitter and direct messaging and all that stuff, and I'll give you my email. I would gladly share any thoughts of application of connectivity with coaches and parents even, and because I'm sure they're coaching at levels, but I think it's important, and I think we're missing the boat if that's not a part of your gig. And I always say connectivity first before competence, because if they don't trust you, you can know everything. It doesn't. It's not going to matter. It's just not going to be. It's not going to happen the way you think it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely not. And so, kids are really good at having the BS meter, right? And so I think that's really interesting that you brought that up, because I actually was going to ask, as we're in the 9th inning of our podcast, I was going to ask and kind of go back to what you were talking about at the very beginning about Clint Hurdle teaching about how to prepare as a leader, because you were talking about preparing your athletes for, kind of the next level. Right. I'm curious about how we can prepare and leave our coaches that are listening and our parents off with a message on how they can prepare to be transformational leaders.
So I will tell you that books are great for gaining knowledge, rearranging the furniture in your head. Sometimes I think there's some interesting things to read I think reading is an important part of our development. I have different thoughts on that now as well. But if you're not a reader, and I'm not saying you need to be a reader, and I went through the phase of I gotta read everything that's out there.
Yeah.
Every conversation I had, I wanted to say, yeah, I got that one. Before I knew it, I had about 12 on my bookshelf next to my bed, and I got 3 going at one time instead of just taking a deep breath and okay, you read one and then reread it. So get some depth of knowledge if you're going to really be able to apply any of those things, right? So I think reading is a good thing. The process of the daily preparation, the daily execution, and the daily review of how that went is the process of improvement and learning. And it is for the player and it is for us. Okay. I think if you're intentional with preparing, executing, and reviewing, and so at the end of the day, the review becomes, would you like what you learn? What do we need to throw out? What do we need to add in? What's the group need tomorrow? What individually do they need tomorrow? The process of nailing that is real knowledge. You're writing your own book, right? And the beauty of it is you're writing a new one every year because you have a new group every year. If you're coaching a group the same way every year and doing the same stuff every year, you're coaching maybe who you want to have or just what you know. And trust me, that was me. It was one, it's this. It was the one thing. But you're writing a new book every year, man. And we're already, in terms of watching and evaluating right now, we're constructing, our national roster and thinking about things. And, this is going to be a very different group than the group I had a year ago, right? It's going to have certain strengths that are well beyond the group. And then other things where we're not as proficient at. So coach what's in front of you and write that manual for that group. And so for me, if you keep putting together good days, of that process, that's gaining real knowledge. All right. More than a great read. Truth be told, gun to my head, hey, you can read books or you can go through practice. That's the only way you're going to gain knowledge. I would bang the books and I would get to learn it because there's nothing like doing to learn. And I think who was it? Who's our guy? Einstein. I think he said experience is knowledge, right? And there is a lot of truth to that. And as you go through stuff and experience more, you know more and you learn more. But it certainly never ends, and it just gets deeper. It gets more interesting.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think what I'm kind of taking from that is, one of the things I took from your podcast previously where I found you from was prepare, execute, review. Cause I used to be the same person where I was like a book a week. Let's jam this much in here. And then a year later, I'd be like, what was that book about? Cause I literally had no idea. I was trying to get it in. I was like, I was looking on the internet. CEOs read 50 books a year. If I want to be a good coach, I should probably do this too, so it's kind of having that self-awareness. And now I'm like, okay, how about 12 to 15 a year? And let's take our time, maybe one a month, and maybe listening to podcasts. That counts as learning too, and watching YouTube videos. Yeah. So I think what you talked about at the beginning is like, you're a learner and you're always a work in progress, no matter what age you are or what stage you are as a coach. Yes. So as the last thing I really would like to ask is just, I know you dropped a lot of wisdom around connectivity, self-awareness, and a lot on transformational leadership, but where can people find you or connect with you so they can get those resources? And then if there was anything for final words of wisdom for coaches and parents, what would you have?
I would say, so I'm on Twitter. I post a few articles a year that I put in there for USA Baseball. So I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. David Turgeon 45, I think is my handle on Twitter. God, that's bad.
I'll put it in the show description. Yeah, so don't worry about it. I'll put it in the description.
But the DM thing is big, and then I can share a cell if they want to get on a phone call and have questions. And my work email, david.turgeon at IMG, is another way to get a hold of me. But I'd be glad to share or fuss and discuss some things if someone cares to. That'd be fine, that's how you can get me.
Beautiful. Do you have any final words of advice?
I would, I would tell people or young coaches, a young me, for example, the things that that was impactful to me was I had to learn about the players. It's about the player. It's not about you. And when you don't have patience, it's about you. And when you have patience, it's about the player. Mm-hmm. And the lack of patience, I found when I look back in my career, when I had a lack of patience, I think that was also a lack of confidence. And it was some ego-driven part of it because the player transition thing hadn't got washed out yet. But I think that's a big one. And it's about them and getting to know them and understanding them and how they learn and all that stuff, but make it personal, and make it personal with the room, but make it personal to each player in a different way. And some of that's very easy. Some of those players, because of either personality types or they have maybe trust issues or some experiences in their lives, make it more challenging. That's the fun of figuring it out. It's got to be a labor of love for you. And then, obviously to continue to learn the game that you're teaching is very important as well. But that will come so much easier when the first piece is there. But yeah, get your focus outward, get it onto your staff, get it to your players and be there for them is a big deal, man. So this guy, Rod Olson, who he did some consulting work for us with Pirates. And one of his phrases that he used, he said, you can't give away what you don't have. And that was, that was impactful. So you've got to continue to work on yourself. And refine and get aware and control your fire or whatever your strength is, and you're either coaching it up or you're allowing it to happen. So if you don't like what's going on and what it looks like on the field, that's when you look inward and say, okay, we need to change some behaviors. That's not championship behaviors we're displaying there. So that's a lot. That's a lot to chew on there. And, that's part of the process, man. That's part of the process. We're fortunate to coach, and we're fortunate to lead, and it's a privilege, not to be taken lightly because you're really impacting people and you're impacting lives, beyond the game.
1,000%. Yeah, no, I wake up every single day and I'm like, I pinch myself that that the universe gave me the skills, not only to be able to coach, but to have the opportunity to coach. I mean, are you kidding me? That's what I get to do for a living. It's amazing. And I get to talk to, wonderful guests and coaches like yourself. So I appreciate your time. When you have patience about a player, it's about them. And when you don't have patience about you, that's going to stick with me. So I really appreciate your time today, Dave.
All right, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. Privilege being on here. Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward and make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.